The first thing one noticed about the Onyx Club after midnight was not the sound, but the silence underneath it. The thrum of the bass was a given, a physical presence in the air that vibrated through the soles of her shoes. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of 100 conversations, that was the surface. But beneath it, in the spaces between the notes, was a watchful, calculating quiet. It was the silence of Chicago's old money, of raw power, of secrets exchanged without a single word being spoken. Elena moved through it all like a ghost in a uniform. Stiff white shirt, black vest, a bow tie that felt more like a noose after 8 hours. For the last 3 years, this velvet-draped cage had been her life. She poured 12-year-old scotch for men who called each other sir while their eyes promised violence. She served champagne to women whose smiles were as sharp and cold as the diamonds at their throats. Elena was invisible, and that was the only thing that kept her safe. Tonight, the silence felt different. Heavier. It started the moment he walked in. They did not have to clear a path. The crowd parted, a human sea yielding to a shark. Gabriel, the wolf thorn. She did not need the hushed whispers to know who he was. Everyone in the city knew. His reputation was a long, dark shadow, and tonight it had fallen across her bar. At 45, he was built with the solid, immovable grace of a cliff face. Dark hair, elegantly silvered at the temples. A suit that probably cost more than her entire former life as a translator. Tailored to perfection. But it was his eyes that arrested her, a chilling, pale gray, like a winter sky moments before a storm. They scanned the room, not with interest, but with absolute ownership. And for a terrifying second, they landed on her. Elena dropped her gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She focused on polishing an already spotless glass, the routine motion a desperate anchor. Asterisk, do not look up. Do not attract attention. Be the ghost. Asterisk. His entourage settled into the reserved booth in the corner, a nest of black suits and watchful eyes. But Gabriel did not sit. He detached himself and walked toward the bar. Her bar. Each footstep on the polished marble floor felt like a nail in her coffin. The space around her emptied as other patrons subtly found reasons to be elsewhere. She was ground zero. Vodka, he said. His voice was a low rumble that bypassed her ears and vibrated straight into her bones. It was precise, demanding, and utterly devoid of warmth. Crystal head, if you have it. Neat. Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. She turned, her movements unusually clumsy, and reached for the iconic skull-shaped bottle. Her hands, normally so steady, trembled. She could feel his gaze on her back, a heavy physical weight. As she poured the crystalline liquid into a heavy tumbler, a man slid onto the stool next to Thorne. He had a slick, nervous energy. It was Marcus, the junior manager. Elena had never liked him. His smile never quite reached his eyes. Gabriel, a pleasure as always, Marcus said, his voice a fraction too loud. Let me get that for you. Before she could react, Marcus reached over the bar, took the glass she had just poured, and set it in front of Gabriel. Then, with a flourish that made Elena's blood run cold, he produced a small, unlabeled bottle from his pocket. A gift, Marcus said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper she was clearly meant to overhear. From the new shipment. The purest you will ever taste. A special blend, just for you. He unscrewed the cap and tipped a single clear drop into the vodka. It vanished without a trace. Elena's breath hitched. Her translator's eye for micro-expressions caught everything. Every instinct she possessed, every lesson learned from a past she had spent a decade running from, screamed in unison. This was wrong. This was a hit. Marcus's posture was too eager, his eyes too bright with a strange, feverish anticipation. The way he had intercepted the drink, the secretive bottle, it was a script from a nightmare she knew all too well. Gabriel stared at the glass, his expression unreadable. He reached for it. Time did not slow down, it shattered. Her father's face flashed in her mind, his voice a desperate echo from the past. Asterisk, do not ever get involved, Elena. You see something, you look the other way. You survive. Asterisk, but looking the other way was how she had ended up at his funeral 10 years ago. Her hands were moving before her mind could catch up. On a pristine cocktail napkin, she scrawled 5 words with a shaking hand. The pen felt like a weapon. She slid the napkin across the polished wood of the bar until it came to a stop right beside his untouched glass. Do not drink it. Smile and leave now. Elena did not look at him. She just turned and busied herself with the sink, pretending to wash a glass. Her entire body braced for the explosion. The silence behind her stretched, taut and deadly. She could feel his gaze shift from the napkin to her. She heard the soft rustle of paper as he picked it up. A second passed, then another. The bass from the club pounded in her temples. Had he read it? Would he listen? Suddenly, a hand shot out, not to take the glass or to throw it away. His fingers, strong and impossibly warm, wrapped around her wrist, pinning it to the bar. The grip was not brutal, but it was absolute, unbreakable. Elena gasped, her head snapping up to meet his winter gray eyes. There was no anger there, no surprise, just a deep, unnerving intensity, as if he were seeing her for the first time, memorizing every single detail. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper meant only for her, the scent of cedar and cold Chicago night air washing over her. Why, Gabriel murmured, his thumb pressing against the frantic pulse in her wrist, would I do that, little ghost? He had not drunk the vodka. He had not left. He had grabbed her instead, and in that moment, Elena knew with terrifying certainty that her life of invisibility was over. The grip on her wrist remained a vice of heat and terrifying promise. Out of the corner of her eye, Elena saw Marcus falter. The junior manager's smug, anticipatory smile dissolved into utter confusion, rapidly replaced by a raw, naked panic. Gabriel, Marcus stammered, his voice cracking under the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Is there a problem with the gift? Gabriel did not even glance his way. His winter gray eyes remained locked on Elena, dissecting her panic. Leave us, he commanded. The words dropped like heavy stones into a quiet pool. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but one of the men from the booth, a mountain of muscle with a jagged scar bisecting his eyebrow, took a single step forward. The bodyguard did not need to draw a weapon. His sheer mass was a threat. Marcus paled, nodded jerkily, and slithered off the stool, disappearing into the crowded club without a single backward glance. They were alone again. An island of terrifying quiet in the sea of heavy bass and oblivious laughter. You have exactly 5 seconds, Gabriel said, his thumb stroking once, slowly, over her pounding pulse point. The gesture was intimate, possessive, and utterly chilling. Who are you? Elena, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. I just work here. That is not who you are. That is where you are. He leaned closer, his voice dropping even further. You saw something. You acted. People who just pour drinks do not do that. They look away. So I will ask again. Who are you and what did you see? The truth was a dangerous currency, but a lie right now would be a death sentence. She could read that much in his eyes. He was a man who dealt in absolutes. The bottle, Elena breathed out, her voice trembling. It was not right. He was too eager. He intercepted the drink you ordered to give you that one. It is a classic play. One of Gabriel's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. A classic play, he repeated, as if tasting the words. You seem familiar with the genre. He finally released her wrist. The skin tingled, already feeling the ghost of his grasp. Elena instinctively cradled it with her other hand, her fingers brushing over the warmth he had left behind. He did not move away. He watched her like a predator assessing strange new prey. We need to leave, Gabriel said, his logic cold, brutal, and utterly confident. If he realizes it did not work, he will panic. Panic makes people stupid. Stupid people are easy to find. He picked up the cocktail napkin she had written on, folded it neatly with one hand, and tucked it into his inner suit pocket. The gesture felt strangely final, like a contract being sealed in blood. "You are coming with me." It was not a question. It was a decree. "I cannot. My shift is not over. I have things." "Your shift," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument, "is over. Permanently. You do not work here anymore. Get your things. Now." The finality in his voice broke to no resistance. Elena's mind raced. Her worn leather bag was in the staff locker room. Her phone, her keys, her pathetic, carefully constructed life were in that bag. To get it, she would have to walk away from him. She would have a moment alone. Was this a test? Would she run? She looked into his eyes and knew with a sinking certainty that running would be the last mistake she ever made. The wolf would find her, and he would not be gentle a second time. Numbly, she nodded. Elena turned and walked toward the staff door on unsteady legs, feeling his heavy gaze burning into her back with every single step. The locker room was a stark contrast to the club opulence, filled with harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of stale perfume. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the combination lock. She shoved her apron inside, grabbed her bag, and slung it over her shoulder. She pushed through the heavy metal door, half expecting him to be gone, praying for this to have been some cruel, surreal joke. But Gabriel was there, waiting in the dim hallway, flanked by two of his massive men. They looked at her not as a person, but as a package, an asset or a problem to be solved. "This way," Gabriel instructed, gesturing toward a service exit she had only ever used to take out the trash. The cold Chicago night air hit her like a physical blow as the metal door swung open onto a dimly lit alley. It smelled of damp concrete and rotting garbage. Parked right there, its engine a low, menacing purr, was a black armored SUV. It looked like a tank dressed in luxury. The heavy back door swung open automatically. "Get in," he commanded. There was no choice. It was the dark alley or the car, the unknown shadows or the man who now held her entire fate in his hands. Elena took a deep breath, fearing it would be her last free breath, and climbed into the opulent, leather-scented darkness. Gabriel slid in beside her, his large frame taking up an immense amount of space in the back seat. The two guards got in the front. The doors closed with a soft, definitive thud, locking her in. The heavy vehicle pulled away from the curb in unnerving silence. Elena stared out the tinted window, watching her old life, the neon lights of the Onyx, the ordinary danger she understood, completely disappear into the night. She was now in a cage rolling on heavy wheels. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice small in the vast, tense quiet of the cabin. "Somewhere secure," he replied, not looking at her. He was already looking at his phone, typing a quick, encrypted message. "Where we can talk," she pleaded. "I told you what I saw. That is all I know." "No," Gabriel said, finally turning his head to look at her. The passing streetlights cast fleeting, harsh shadows across his sharp features. "That is the beginning of what you know. You recognized a classic play. You risked your neck for a complete stranger. That is a story I very much want to hear. So, Elena, start from the beginning. Not tonight's beginning. The real one." The words hung in the perfumed air of the car, acting as a key poised before a lock she had sealed shut 10 years ago. Where was the beginning? Was it the day they lowered her father into the ground? The truth was a landmine, and every step could trigger a fatal explosion. "There is no story," she said, turning her face to look out the window at the blur of the sleeping city. "I am a bartender. I watch people. It is my job to know when someone is lying, when they are nervous, when they are about to do something stupid. Your manager, Marcus, was all three." She could feel his gaze on her profile, dissecting her defenses layer by layer. "He is not my manager," came the simple, chilling correction. "And you are not just a bartender. You have the eyes of someone who has seen the wolf before and knows better than to look away." The metaphor sent a fresh shiver down her spine. He was far too perceptive. She had to give him something, a piece of the truth that was sharp enough to be believable, but small enough not to gut her completely. She kept her eyes fixed on the passing city. My father was an import and export, Elena lied smoothly, leaning on her old cover story. He had business partners. I grew up around men who smiled with their mouths, but never with their eyes. I learned to read the tells. The handshake that is too firm, meant to intimidate. The joke that is not really a joke. The way someone offers a drink they did not order themselves. She chanced a glance at him. His expression was utterly unreadable, but he was listening. Truly listening. Marcus had shaking hands. His pupils were dilated. He was performing, but doing it terribly. The special bottle from his pocket was a prop. It was a performance I have seen before. She left it there, letting Gabriel draw his own conclusions. Let him think her father was a low-level crook. It was safer than the truth of her past as a corporate translator caught in a cartel crossfire. Your father, Gabriel repeated, his voice thoughtful, dark. Where is he now? He is dead. The words were flat and final. His business partner saw to that. This, at least, was not a lie. A moment of silence passed, filled only by the whisper of the heavy tires on the asphalt. Then you understand the nature of the world, Gabriel stated. It was not a question. It was a grim, undeniable welcome into his domain. It is not a kind place. Loyalty is a currency, and betrayal is the tax on power. He fell silent again, and Elena dared to hope the interrogation was over for the night, trapped beside the most dangerous man in Chicago as they sped toward an unknown destination. The armored vehicle left the bright, chaotic lights of downtown Chicago behind, navigating toward a neighborhood of towering, silent condominiums that overlooked the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. They pulled into a private underground garage, the heavy steel gate sliding shut behind them with a heavy sound of absolute finality. The space was pristine, lit by cold fluorescent panels, and housed a small collection of vehicles that were each worth a small fortune. This was not merely a home. It was a secure location, a bunker cleverly disguised as luxury. Caleb, the mountain of a man with a scarred eyebrow, got out first. He scanned the perimeter with practiced efficiency before opening their door. Gabriel stepped out, his presence immediately dominating the sterile concrete room, and waited for Elena to follow. They entered a private elevator equipped with a biometric scanner. Gabriel pressed his thumb to the glowing pad, and the steel box ascended smoothly, climbing high above the city streets. When the doors parted, Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. The entire far wall of the penthouse was crafted from floor to ceiling glass, offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Chicago skyline and the ink-black water of the lake. The interior was a masterpiece of cool minimalism. Polished concrete floors stretched out to meet low-slung leather furniture and stark white walls adorned with a few pieces of brutalist art. It was powerful, intensely masculine, and utterly soulless. It fit Gabriel Thorne perfectly. "You will stay here tonight," Gabriel said. He shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it casually over the back of a leather chair. He moved with a predatory grace toward a sleek bar cart, far more elegant than the one she had commanded just an hour ago, and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He did not offer her one. "Caleb will remain outside the front door," Gabriel continued, taking a slow sip. "Do not attempt to leave." The command was absolute. He was treating her exactly like a prisoner, albeit one housed in a luxury cell. "You cannot keep me here," Elena said. A spark of her old defiance ignited despite the crushing fear threatening to swallow her whole. Gabriel lowered his glass. His pale winter eyes penned her across the vast room. "I can and I am. You interfered in a matter you do not fully understand. That single act made you a part of it. Until I know exactly who Marcus was working for and what they intended, you are a material witness and a potential target." A target. The word dropped like a cold stone into her stomach. "They saw you," Gabriel stated, his voice devoid of pity. "They saw you speak to me. They saw me take you out the back door." If they are competent, they will already know your name and your address. He let that terrifying reality hang in the quiet air. Her apartment. Her small, shabby, but fiercely guarded apartment with its flimsy deadbolt and oblivious neighbors. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a trap. The reality of her situation crashed down on her all at once. She was homeless, hunted, and trapped in the penthouse of a notorious crime lord. "This is insane," Elena whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around her own waist. "I was just trying to do the right thing." "The right thing," he repeated, a flicker of something dark and dangerous crossing his features. "A very dangerous habit in my city." He finished his drink and set the glass down with a soft, sharp click. "There is a guest room down the hall to the right. It has everything you might need. We will continue this conversation in the morning." Gabriel turned and walked away, disappearing behind a heavy oak door without another word, leaving her standing entirely alone in the vast, silent, beautiful room. Elena was adrift. She found the guest room blindly. It resembled a suite at an exclusive hotel, featuring a king-size bed, a marble-tiled ensuite bathroom, and a walk-in closet empty except for a plush white robe. It was impersonal and terrifyingly perfect. She sat on the very edge of the mattress, her worn leather bag still slung over her shoulder, feeling dirty and profoundly out of place. She pulled her mobile phone from her pocket. No service, of course. Gabriel had thought of absolutely everything. The signal was blocked, cutting her off completely from the outside world. Elena did not sleep. She lay on top of the absurdly comfortable duvet, fully clothed, staring blankly at the dark ceiling. She listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the high-rise building. Every creak of the glass, every hum of the central air conditioning felt like a potential threat. Her mind raced, shifting gears into the hyper-analytical state she used to rely on as a corporate translator. She tried to parse the events of the evening like a complex legal document, searching for loopholes, looking for a way out. She analyzed the variables. She had a few $100s in cash, a suspended life, and a face that was now marked by a syndicate hit squad. Where would she run? How could she hide from men who own the very shadows of Chicago? Her translator logic offered no comfort, only the brutal, unvarnished truth. There was no linguistic trick to talk her way out of this room. She had spent 10 grueling years desperately trying to remain invisible, carefully constructing a quiet, unremarkable existence. Now, with 5 words scrawled on a cocktail napkin, she had burned it all to the ground. She had traded a life of quiet desperation for a gilded cage, and the wolf was sleeping just down the hall. The sun crested the horizon, bleeding a pale, sickly light across the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. It filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest room, illuminating Elena where she still sat on the very edge of the mattress. She had not slept a single minute. The events of the night played on a continuous, agonizing loop in her exhausted mind. A sharp, authoritative knock broke the heavy silence. Elena jolted, her heart leaping into her throat. Before she could answer, the door swung open. It was not Gabriel. It was a woman in her late 50s, with piercing, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back into a severe silver bun. She wore an impeccably tailored pantsuit and carried a thick leather briefcase. "Elena, I presume," the woman said. Her voice was crisp and strictly professional. "I am Ms. Hayes. Mr. Thorne has asked me to see to your immediate necessities." Ms. Hayes set the briefcase on the glass coffee table and snapped it open. Inside lay a brand new smartphone, a sleek laptop, and a leather wallet. The phone and laptop are secure, connected to a private encrypted network. They cannot be traced, and their usage is heavily monitored. "Your old phone, please." Hesitantly, Elena retrieved her old device from her bag and handed it over. Ms. Hayes dropped it into a lined pouch without a second glance. The wallet contains new identification, credit cards, and a modest amount of cash, Ms. Hayes continued, her tone brisk. "Your old identity is suspended for the time being. It is strictly for your protection." Elena picked up the stiff plastic card. Elena Rossi. The name felt utterly foreign on her tongue. The photo was one she did not remember taking, her face pale and deadly serious. "He cannot just give me a new name," Elena whispered, the reality of her erasure finally setting in. "He can, and he has," Miss Hayes replied, entirely unmoved. "It is a temporary measure. Your meager financial accounts have been consolidated and transferred to a secure institution. Your apartment rent has been paid for the next 6 months, though you will certainly not be returning there. Your employer at the Onyx has been informed that you resigned effective immediately due to a severe family emergency. All loose ends have been tied. And the few people who know me?" Elena asked, her voice cracking under the weight of her vanishing existence. "A message has been sent from your old number explaining that you have taken a last-minute, highly lucrative translation contract on a private yacht in the Mediterranean. Limited communication for several months. It is a highly credible cover." Miss Hayes closed the briefcase with a sharp snap. "Is there anything else you require?" Elena just stared at her, utterly speechless. In the span of a few hours, her entire life had been systematically dismantled and reassembled by total strangers. The terrifying part was not just the brutal efficiency. The most frightening part was the small, traitorous piece of her soul that fell to profound relief. The exhausting charade of her old life was over. The wolf had swallowed her past whole. Miss Hayes left, and an hour later, Caleb appeared at the door. He escorted her down the long hall and opened a heavy oak door. The study was a room designed for secrets. Paneled in rich dark wood, it had no windows, only walls lined with rare books and a massive mahogany desk. Gabriel sat behind it, looking as though he had not slept either, yet he radiated a dangerous, coiled energy. A fresh cup of black coffee steamed at his elbow. "Sit," Gabriel commanded, gesturing to a leather chair opposite him. "Now we begin your real work. We are going to reconstruct last night. Every second, every face, every whispered word. You are going to take me back to the club, and you are going to show me exactly what you saw." Elena closed her eyes, pushing past the lingering fog of fear. She forced her mind into the clinical, detached state she used when translating complex, high-stakes negotiations. It was around 10:30, Elena began softly. Marcus came in through the staff entrance, which was highly unusual. He looked agitated. He went straight to his office. He did not come out until just before you arrived. "Did he speak to anyone?" Gabriel probed, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Elena sifted through the sensory flood of her memory. He posted himself near the host stand, waiting. But before you walked in, someone approached him. A man. Gabriel leaned forward, the leather of his chair creaking. "Describe him." "Average height, very thin. He wore a gray overcoat. It was expensive but tailored poorly, perhaps 2 sizes too big. He kept his hat pulled low. I never saw his face." He handed Marcus a small envelope and what looked like the bottle. "Nothing else." Gabriel pressed, his eyes narrowing with intense focus. "His hands," Elena said, her eyes snapping open as the memory crystallized with perfect clarity. When he reached out, the club lights caught a ring on his right pinky finger. It was silver with a dark stone. It had a very specific symbol carved into it. A bird of prey. A stylized hawk. Gabriel went perfectly, terrifyingly still. The air in the study seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You are absolutely certain?" "I am sure," Elena confirmed, her translator's eye for detail unwavering. Gabriel leaned back slowly, his expression darkening into something lethal. "That ring belongs to a man named Silas Graves. He is not a foot soldier. He is a high-level facilitator, a broker of absolute chaos. He arranges things from the deepest shadows. If Silas Graves delivered the poison to Marcus, it means this contract did not originate from a simple street rival." Gabriel looked at her, and the cold assessment in his eyes shifted into something resembling genuine respect. "This is a professional hit, sanctioned by someone with massive resources," Gabriel stated, his voice a deadly promise. "Silas is a ghost, but he is a ghost you have now seen. Your eyes are far more valuable than I realized, Elena." The heavy silence in the study was broken by the sharp chirp of the encrypted phone on Gabriel's desk. He picked it up, listening for a long moment before his jaw tightened into a rigid line. He set the device down gently, a movement far more terrifying than if he had thrown it against the wall. "That was Vince," Gabriel said, his voice stripped of all emotion. "They located Marcus." Elena froze in her leather chair. "And? He was found in his apartment an hour ago. An apparent suicide." The words poured ice water directly into her veins. Suicide. She knew how terrified Marcus had been. He would not have killed himself. "It is a professional cleanup," Gabriel continued, reading her mind. "Silas Graves leaves no loose threads. Whoever hired Silas is thorough, and they are still out there. This means your value to me has just increased, Elena." Before she could process the morbid reality of her new worth, the heavy study door opened. A man stepped inside, moving with the quiet, lethal grace of a seasoned predator. He wore a dark suit and carried a secure tablet. This was Vince, Gabriel's right hand. His eyes flicked to Elena for a fraction of a second, dismissing her entirely before focusing on his boss. "The sweep of Marcus's apartment yielded nothing," Vince reported, his voice grovelly. "No prints, no fibers, no data on his personal devices. It was wiped clean. I expected nothing less from Silas," Gabriel replied. "What of the financial audit I requested?" Vince stepped forward, setting the tablet on the mahogany desk. "While looking into Marcus's recent activities, I ran a deep audit on all internal expenditures with high-level clearance. There is a discrepancy. A series of recurring payments to a security consulting firm that does not seem to exist in the real world. The vendor was added to our internal system 6 months ago." Gabriel leaned over the screen. "The payments are small, easily overlooked in our volume of business. A few $1,000s a month. But the pattern is highly consistent. And the timing coincides perfectly with when our security protocols at the shipping docks were mysteriously compromised." The air in the room thickened. This was no longer just an external threat from a rival family. This was a worm burrowing deep from within. Betrayal from a trusted lieutenant inside the organization. Elena sat frozen in her chair, feeling like she was eavesdropping on a mafia execution. Gabriel looked up, his pale gray eyes cutting straight to her. He picked up the tablet and walked around the desk. He stopped right in front of her chair and turned the screen toward her face. "Look at these transaction descriptions," Gabriel commanded softly. "The language on the invoices. Tell me exactly what you see." Then shifted on his feet, clearly annoyed by the inclusion of an outsider in syndicate business. "Gabriel, she is a bartender. She is an observer," Gabriel corrected without breaking eye contact with Elena. "Look at it." It was another test. Elena took the tablet, her fingers brushing against the cold metal casing. The screen displayed a long list of payments for strategic security analysis, ongoing risk assessment, and consultancy services rendered. The descriptions were bland, corporate, and specifically designed to be entirely ignored by anyone skimming a ledger. Her brain automatically shifted gears, analyzing not the numerical values, but the architecture of the words themselves. "The grammar is technically correct," Elena started, her voice gaining strength as she fell into the familiar comfort of linguistics. "But the word choice is completely off. It is repetitive and stilted. For example, the phrase "for rendering of provided services" is not how an American corporate entity writes an invoice. It reads like someone who understands English syntax technically, but is not a native speaker. They are mimicking the language from real invoices without understanding the natural, colloquial flow. She looked up from the screen, meeting Gabriel's intense gaze. It is a clear pattern. Someone is creating a fake paper trail to siphon money, and they are not being careful with the linguistics. They are translating thought patterns from another language directly into English. Vince stared at her, his earlier dismissal entirely replaced by a grudging, sharp curiosity. Our accounting firm missed that detail for 6 full months. Gabriel did not look at Vince. His focus remained anchored on Elena. Who authorized the spender, Vince? The system credentials belong to Arthur, Vince said, his tone tight. The chief accountant. Gabriel closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Arthur has been with his family for 15 years. Arthur has a nephew, Vince pointed out quietly, freshly arrived from overseas. He works in the mail room. His English is exceptionally poor. The pieces clicked together with an audible, sickening finality in the quiet room. The nephew had the access to see real invoices and the ability to mimic them, but lacked the fluency to get the phrasing perfectly natural. Arthur had the authority to approve the fake vendor inside the system. "Bring Arthur here," Gabriel said, his voice dropping into a deadly whisper that sent a fresh wave of terror through Elena. "Do not alert him to the issue. Tell him I need his immediate expertise on the European expansion portfolios. I want him sitting in this room in exactly 1 hour." Vince nodded sharply and left the study, the door clicking shut behind him. Gabriel turned and walked slowly toward the wall of rare books. The silence was heavy, weighed down by the crushing reality of a close friend's betrayal. Elena realized with a sickening jolt what she had just done. By pointing out a simple grammatical error, she had just sealed a man's fate. She had officially stopped being a passive victim running from the shadows. She was now actively participating in the violent, calculating mechanics of Gabriel Thorne's world. Exactly 60 minutes later, Elena found herself seated in a high-backed leather chair pushed deep into the darkest corner of the vast study. Gabriel had ordered her to remain completely silent. She was to be the unseen audience, a ghost once again, tasked with observing the dissection of a traitor. The heavy oak door swung open. Vince escorted Arthur inside before stepping back into the hallway and pulling the door shut. Arthur was a man in his late 50s, possessing a kind, weathered face and a suit that hung a little too loosely on his frame. He clutched a thick leather folder to his chest. He looked exactly like a tired accountant. He did not look like a man who had sold his king to the wolves. "Gabriel," Arthur said, his voice warm with genuine familiarity. "You asked for me. I brought the European expansion portfolios you wanted." "Sit down, Arthur," Gabriel commanded softly, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. His tone was perfectly level, devoid of any malice. Arthur sat, placing the heavy folder on the polished mahogany. He seemed eager, leaning forward slightly. "The projections for the Milan holdings are quite promising. The regulatory landscape is complex, but we will get to the European assets shortly," Gabriel interrupted gently. "First, I need your expertise on a much smaller, domestic matter." Vince brought a discrepancy in the internal ledgers to my attention. "There are recurring payments to a new security firm. The system authorization carries your specific digital signature." The change in Arthur was instantaneous. Elena watched from the shadows as the older man's posture stiffened. A thin sheen of sweat materialized on his upper lip. His eyes darted toward the door for a fraction of a second. "My signature," Arthur repeated, his voice suddenly hollow. "That must be a system error. A glitch in the new routing software. I will have the technical team look into it immediately." "The firm does not seem to exist, Arthur," Gabriel continued, his voice remaining terrifyingly calm. He was a spider feeling the first frantic vibrations in his web. "A shell company, perhaps," Arthur offered, forcing a weak smile. "You know how these contractors set things up for tax purposes. The descriptions on the invoices are highly peculiar," Gabriel noted, letting the silence stretch between his words. "The phrasing is stilted. It reads as though it were written by someone who does not speak English natively. It reminded me quite heavily of your nephew. How is the boy settling into his role in the mailroom?" It was a masterful, devastating trap. Arthur walked directly into it. "He is fine," Arthur answered too quickly. "A hard worker, but his English is still very poor. He would never be involved in something like this, Gabriel. I swear it." Arthur stopped abruptly. The blood drained entirely from his face as he realized his fatal mistake. He had just confirmed the nephew's lack of fluency without Gabriel ever formally accusing the boy of writing the invoices. The air evaporated from the room. Gabriel did not raise his voice, nor did he reach for a weapon. He simply leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "You have been with this family for 15 years, Arthur," Gabriel said. The quiet disappointment in his voice was far more terrifying than a shout. "You held my sister's child at his baptism. What was the price of your loyalty?" Arthur broke. The genial mask of the loyal accountant shattered, revealing raw, unadulterated terror beneath. He fell out of his chair, dropping to his knees on the expensive Persian rug. Sobs racked his aging body. "Gabriel, please," Arthur begged, his hands trembling violently. "It was just a little money. It was for my daughter. The medical treatments for her lungs, the experimental trials, they are not covered by any insurance. She is dying, Gabriel. I was going to pay every single cent back. I swear on my life." "A little money," Gabriel repeated, his pale eyes entirely devoid of warmth. "And in return, what else did you give them? Because Silas Graves does not work for petty cash." "Who bought you, Arthur?" "Julian," Arthur sobbed, pressing his forehead almost to the floor. "Julian approached me. He knew about the money I took. He said he would expose me, ruin my family, unless I gave him the shipping schedules and the blind spots in your security rotation. He promised it was just for leverage in the supply chain. I did not know they were going to try to kill you at the club. You must believe me." Elena sat frozen in the shadows, her hands clamped tightly over her mouth. She was listening to a man's soul being torn to pieces. This was the true cost of Gabriel's world. It was ugly, desperate, and profoundly heartbreaking. Gabriel stood up slowly. He looked down at the weeping man. Elena braced herself, fully expecting Gabriel to draw a weapon and end the betrayal right there on the rug. The absolute rule of the underworld demanded blood for treason. Instead, Gabriel walked around the desk. "You have a daughter who needs her father," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Vince will take you to a secure vehicle. You will write down every single detail you provided to Julian. Every date, every file, every whispered conversation. If your information is accurate, your daughter will keep her medical fund, and she will keep her father. But you are to leave Chicago tonight. If I ever see your face in my city again, Arthur, there will be no second conversation. Is that understood?" It was a mercy Elena had never anticipated. A shred of grace offered in the darkest depths of damnation. Arthur could only nod frantically, his body shaking with a violent mixture of relief and immense shame. Gabriel pressed a button on his desk. Vince entered immediately, his face an unreadable mask, and hauled Arthur to his feet. The two men left the study, and the heavy door clicked shut, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Gabriel stood alone in the center of the room, staring at the empty space on the rug where his friend had just wept. He looked impossibly tired. Elena slowly stood up and stepped out of the shadows. He heard her movements, but did not turn around. "You showed him mercy," Elena said softly. "Mercy is a luxury I can rarely afford," Gabriel replied, his back still turned to her. "But children should not be made orphans because of the sins of their fathers. It is a lesson I learned entirely too well." In that brief, quiet moment, he was not the ruthless wolf Chicago feared. He was just a man standing in the ruins of his own trust, burdened by the crushing weight of the power he wielded. Elena looked at the rigid line of his shoulders and felt an undeniable, terrifying pull toward him. The black and white roles of her survival were dissolving. She was beginning to see the gray. The aftermath of Arthur's dismissal left a heavy resonance in the penthouse. The immediate venom had been extracted, but the phantom pain of the betrayal lingered. That evening, the vast dining room was illuminated by the soft glow of a low-hanging chandelier. A private meal had been meticulously prepared and served by unseen staff. Elena sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, wearing the soft cashmere clothes Ms. Hayes had provided. Gabriel sat opposite her. The physical distance between them was significant, yet the air crackled with a new, uncharted tension. The paralyzing terror that had gripped Elena since her abduction had subtly mutated. Witnessing the wolf spare the accountant had fundamentally altered her perception of the cage she was in. She picked up her wine glass, her movements no longer frantic or clumsy. "You are exceptionally quiet tonight," Gabriel observed. His voice broke the stillness, smooth and dangerously soft. He swirled the dark red wine in his crystal glass, his pale eyes studying her intently. "I am processing," Elena replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "In my previous profession, a mistranslated clause could cost a corporation millions. In your world, a mistranslated loyalty costs lives. I am simply adjusting my vocabulary." A faint, genuine shadow of a smile touched the corners of Gabriel's mouth. It transformed his severe features, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the monster. "Your vocabulary saved my empire today. Most people in my position would look at those ledgers and only see numbers. You saw the architecture of a lie." "Numbers are rigid," Elena said, setting her glass down carefully. "Words are fluid. They carry the psychological fingerprint of the person writing them." Julian's man tried to speak the language of corporate security, but he could not hide his native cadence. People always reveal exactly who they are through their syntax, even when they are trying their hardest to lie. Gabriel leaned back in his heavy chair, completely abandoning his meal. His focus was entirely consumed by the small, quiet woman across from him. "And what does my syntax reveal about me, Elena?" Tea was a dangerous game, stepping into the predator's territory and analyzing his teeth. But the adrenaline of the day pushed her forward. She leaned forward slightly, resting her forearms on the table. "It reveals that you are a man who demands absolute control because you are terrified of the chaos," Elena stated. Her voice was steady, resonating in the quiet room. "You speak in commands and absolutes to build a wall around yourself. Use fear as your primary dialect because it is efficient. But today, with Arthur, you spoke a different dialect. You chose precision over brutality. That tells me the ruthless king of Chicago is wearing a mask." Silence descended over the dining room. It was not the oppressive, terrifying silence of the club. It was a heavy, charged anticipation. Elena held her breath, wondering if she had finally pushed too far. Gabriel stood up slowly. He walked the length of the table, his footsteps making no sound on the thick rugs. He stopped right beside her chair. Elena refused to look away, tilting her head up to meet his storm-gray eyes. "My father," Gabriel began, his voice dropping to a low, intimate vibration, believed that violence was the only universal language. "He built this syndicate on bones and ash. I spent my entire life perfecting that language to survive him. But you, my little ghost, you speak a dialect I have never encountered before." He rested his hand on the back of her chair. The heat radiating from him was a physical force. "You are not afraid of me anymore," he noted, sounding almost fascinated by the revelation. "I am terrified of you, Gabriel," Elena corrected him softly. "But I am no longer afraid of what you might do to me. There is a difference." "Explain the difference," he demanded, his gaze locked onto her lips before dragging back up to her eyes. "I am terrified of the gravity you pull," she whispered, the raw honesty slipping out before her rational mind could cage it. "I spent 10 years making myself entirely invisible. I survived by never looking anyone in the eye. But you see me. You see the translator, the survivor. You did not just kidnap me. You dragged me out of the shadows and forced me to exist again." Gabriel leaned down, his face mere inches from hers. The scent of expensive wine and shark cedar surrounded her, intoxicating and lethal. "You are never meant for the shadows, Elena," Gabriel murmured. The cold assessment that usually defined his stare was completely gone, replaced by a dark, burning hunger. "You have a mind like a razor blade. You navigated the treachery of my inner circle in a single afternoon. You are not a pawn to be hidden away." He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing the curve of her cheek. The touch was agonizingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he orchestrated daily. Elena shivered, her eyes fluttering shut for a fraction of a second at the contact. The dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer just the captor interrogating a witness. She was no longer just the terrified prey waiting for the killing stroke. In the span of a single dinner, the high walls of their respective isolations had cracked. They were two solitary, dangerous minds circling each other in the dark, realizing they spoke the exact same language. Gabriel let his hand drop slowly, his knuckles trailing a phantom heat along her jawline before he stepped back. The dark, burning hunger in his eyes did not fade, but it was carefully banked, contained behind the iron will that ruled his empire. Elena took a slow, deliberate breath, resisting the urge to touch the skin he had just graced. She had not pulled away from his touch, a realization that terrified her far more than the guns of his cartel enemies ever could. "We are discussing dialects of power," Elena said softly, needing to fill the heavy silence with logic. "Physical intimidation is the most basic one. It is loud and ultimately fragile. True control is completely silent." Gabriel studied her for a long moment, a dark amusement dancing in his winter gray eyes. He motioned toward the expansive living area, where the chaotic lights of Chicago glittered like scattered diamonds through the pristine glass. "Walk with me, Elena," Gabriel invited, his voice a low velvet rumble. "Let us see exactly how fluent you truly are." They moved away from the dining table. Gabriel walked to a crystal decanter resting on a dark wood credenza. This time, he poured 2 glasses of scotch. He turned and handed one to her. It was a subtle, profound shift in their dynamic. She was no longer being treated as a captive asset or a civilian requiring protection. By handing her the glass, he was acknowledging her as an equal participant in the dark chess match of his life. Elena took the glass, her fingers brushing his. She sat on the edge of a leather sofa, while Gabriel took the armchair opposite her, resting his elbows on his knees. "Arthur was a symptom," Gabriel began, swirling the amber liquid. "Julian is probing my defenses, looking for fractures. You possess a unique vantage point. You observed my vanguard. Tell me what you saw in the men guarding my door." It was a direct challenge. Elena took a sip of the scotch, letting the burn focus her mind. She shifted fully into the analytical persona that had once made her a top-tier corporate translator. She did not translate words, she translated intentions. "Vince respects you," Elena stated, her voice clear and unwavering. "But he operates entirely on pure, cold logic. He views the syndicate as an algorithmic equation. If the logic of your leadership ever fails to compute, his loyalty might waver. He requires constant proof of your strategic superiority." Gabriel did not blink. He merely nodded once, silently urging her to continue. "Caleb is the opposite," she went on. "He operates on absolute devotion. When Marcus was in the club, Caleb did not wait for a verbal command to step forward. He read your microscopic shift in posture. Caleb does not think about the consequences of an order. He simply executes it. You need both types of men to survive, Gabriel. But you must speak to them in entirely different languages to keep them tethered to you." A heavy, charged silence filled the penthouse. Gabriel looked genuinely mesmerized. He set his glass down on the glass table. "You have been inside my home for less than 48 hours, Gabriel noted, his voice laced with profound fascination. "You have uncovered a traitor, decoded a fake ledger, and surgically dissected my inner circle. You analyze everyone around you with terrifying precision to avoid looking at yourself." The conversation pivoted sharply, the intellectual sparring turning intensely personal. Gabriel leaned forward, closing the physical distance between them. "A brilliant translator hiding behind a dive bar pouring cheap vodka," he continued, his gaze piercing through her carefully constructed armor. "What exactly did you mistranslate, Elena? What word was so catastrophic that it forced you to erase your own existence?" The strike landed deep, directly hitting the wound she had spent 10 years trying to cauterize. Elena tightened her grip on the heavy crystal glass until her knuckles turned white. She could have lied. She could have deflected. But he had shared the brutal reality of his world with Arthur. He demanded a matching vulnerability. It was not a mistranslation, she answered, her voice dropping to a hollow whisper. It was a perfect translation. A highly complex contract between a legitimate shipping firm and a cartel shell company. I saw the truth buried deep within the clauses. My father was the liaison for the shipping firm. He did not know what they really were. I warned him. He tried to back out of the deal. Gabriel listened intently, the missing pieces of her puzzle finally falling into place. The reason she had run. The reason she possessed the eyes of a survivor. The reason she had risked her life to slide a warning napkin across a polished far. She could not stand by and watch another murder unfold before her eyes. You could not save him, Gabriel stated. It was a brutal fact, entirely devoid of pity, a stark honesty that Elena deeply appreciated. No, she agreed, looking down at her glass. So I became a ghost. Ghosts cannot be leveraged. Ghosts cannot be threatened. Ghosts do not feel. Yet you felt compelled to save a monster from a poisoned glass, he countered. Gabriel stood up from his chair and closed the remaining distance, sitting directly beside her on the leather sofa. The space between them vanished. Elena could feel the ambient heat of his body, the dangerous, magnetic pull of his presence. You failed at being a ghost, Elena, he murmured, his face so close she could feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek. You are entirely too vibrant for the shadows. You survived by learning the language of predators, but you forgot that speaking it so fluently makes you one of us. The intellectual skirmish was over. They had stripped away the polite fictions and the defensive barriers. He was no longer looking at a useful tool or a curious anomaly. He was looking at a woman who perfectly mirrored his own dark isolation, a woman who understood the crushing weight of survival. The tension in the air morphed into something heavy, electric, and suffocatingly intimate. Elena looked up into his eyes and saw the walls of his legendary control beginning to crack. For a long, agonizing moment, neither of them moved. The clock on the wall chimed softly, marking 2 a.m. Gabriel stood up abruptly, the sudden movement severing the hypnotic spell. He recognized that if he stayed on that sofa for 1 second longer, he would break every rigid rule of restraint he had ever set for himself. I have calls to make regarding Silas Graves, Gabriel said, his voice rough, entirely stripped of its usual smooth cadence. Try to get some sleep, Elena. He turned and strode toward his private office, leaving her alone in the dim living room. But sleep was an absolute impossibility. Her mind was racing, her blood humming with an adrenaline that had nothing to do with fear. Restless and wide awake, Elena set her glass down and began to wander through the silent, cavernous penthouse, her bare feet eventually leading her toward the heavy wooden doors of Gabriel's private library. The heavy wooden doors of the library yielded with a soft click. Elena stepped into the cavernous room, the thick Persian carpet swallowing the sound of her bare feet. The air here was entirely different from the rest of the penthouse. It smelled of old paper, binding leather, and the faint, lingering spice of Gabriel's cologne. Moonlight spilled through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across 2 stories of towering bookshelves. A wrought iron spiral staircase led to a mezzanine level. It was breathtaking. It was a silent sanctuary built for a man who dealt exclusively in violence. She wandered the aisles, trailing her fingers along the spines of history texts, philosophy tomes, and political biographies. It was a reader's library, meticulously curated and deeply personal. She climbed the cold metal steps of the spiral staircase. On a small reading desk near the edge of the mezzanine, a single book sat isolated, bathed in a sliver of pale moonlight. Elena picked it up. It was a small, cloth-bound collection of Italian sonnets. The edges were frayed, the pages soft with age and repeated handling. It felt like a glaring anomaly, a profound vulnerability hidden in the very heart of a fortress. The book fell open naturally to a page where the spine had been cracked. A single stanza was circled faintly in pencil. "My love is a fever, longing still." She traced the graphite circle with a trembling finger. Who did the wolf long for? What ghost haunted the man who haunted all of Chicago? You are drawn to that book. Elena gasped, spinning around. The book nearly slipped from her grasp. Gabriel stood at the base of the staircase, a shadow detaching itself from the darker corners of the room. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie. The top buttons of his crisp white shirt were undone, revealing the hard lines of his collarbone. "It is a contradiction," Elena said, her voice echoing softly in the vast space. "I am trying to understand it." "Some contradictions are not meant to be understood," Gabriel replied. His bare feet made absolutely no sound as he began to climb the spiral stairs. "Only accepted." He stopped 2 steps below her, their eyes level now. The moonlight caught the silver at his temples, making him look like a weary, fallen king. "My mother was a poet," Gabriel murmured, his gaze dropping to the worn cover in her hands. "A terrible one. But she loved the words. She believed they could save people." "She sounds like a romantic," Elena whispered. "She was a fool," he stated. There was no malice in his voice, only a deep, abiding sadness that chilled Elena to the bone. "She loved my father. She believed her love could gentle a monster. It could not. This world devours romantics, Elena." His eyes met hers, and the warning burning in them was as clear as a physical blow. "It is why I have always avoided them," Gabriel added, his voice dropping an octave. "Until now." The question slipped from her lips, reckless and completely stripped of her usual caution. Gabriel did not answer with words. He closed the remaining distance between them in 2 slow, deliberate strides. He did not touch her, but his proximity was suffocating. Elena could feel the ambient heat of his skin, smell the dark whiskey on his breath. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, echoing the terrifying thudding of the bass at the club. But this time, the danger was entirely different. Every cell in her body screamed a chaotic chorus, a war between running away and leaning closer. "You are not a romantic," Gabriel breathed, his voice a low vibration that traveled straight down her spine. "You are a realist. A survivor. That is the only reason you are still standing here. That is the only reason I am allowing this madness." "What madness?" she breathed back, her back pressing against the cold metal railing of the mezzanine. His hand came up slowly. He brushed a stray strand of dark hair from her cheek. His fingertips were calloused, but surprisingly gentle, a whisper of contact that sent a violent jolt straight to her core. "This," he said, and then he kissed her. It was not gentle, nor was it questioning. It was an absolute claim, a sudden, explosive release of all the pent-up tension, the terrifying curiosity, and the dangerous attraction that had been simmering between them since the moment he had grabbed her wrist at the bar. His mouth was firm, demanding, and tasting of scotch and raw power. Elena met his demand with a surge of her own reckless abandon. The book of sonnets slipped from her nerveless fingers, tumbling down the stairs to land on the carpet below with a soft thud. Her hands came up, not to push him away, but to clutch desperately at the lapels of his shirt, anchoring herself in the center of the storm. It was a kiss that tasted of impending ruin. It was the worst decision she had ever made in her 32 years of life, and in that exact moment, it felt like the only decision that made any sense at all. When he finally broke the kiss, they were both breathing heavily. His forehead rested against hers, his eyes closed tightly as if fighting an internal war. "This is a terrible idea," Elena whispered, echoing the panicked logic of her survival instincts. "The worst," Gabriel agreed, his voice rough, scraping against the quiet air. But his arms tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard, scarred chest until there was absolutely no space left between them. The rigid rules of survival Elena had built over 10 years crumbled into dust. She tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him back down to her. He groaned, a raw, unfiltered sound, and captured her mouth again. The invisible bartender was gone, consumed entirely by the fire. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows was harsh and unforgiving, stripping away the dark, intoxicating magic of the library. Elena lay awake in the vast guest bed, the expensive sheets tangled around her limbs. Every muscle in her body ached with the memory of Gabriel's touch. She had broken her single most important rule of survival. She had let the wolf in, surrendering to the chaotic pull of a man who dealt in death. She forced herself to rise, dressing in a simple black sweater and dark trousers provided by Ms. Hayes. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric. The quiet confidence she had found the night before felt fragile in the cold light of day. She stepped out of the guest suite, preparing herself for the inevitable awkwardness, or worse, the chilling indifference of a predator who had finished his hunt. The penthouse was deadly quiet. Elena found Gabriel standing near the expansive glass wall of the living room. He was fully armored in a pristine charcoal suit, a secure phone pressed to his ear. The vulnerable, raw man who had devoured her mouth in the shadows of the mezzanine was completely gone. In his place stood the ruthless architect of the Chicago syndicate. Gabriel ended the call and turned to face her. His winter gray eyes were unreadable, devoid of any romantic softness. There would be no gentle morning after, no whispered promises. They lived in a world where sentiment was a fatal weakness, and Gabriel Thorne did not tolerate weakness. He walked toward her, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished concrete. He stopped mere inches away, the sheer force of his presence demanding her absolute submission. Without a single word, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a slim, black velvet box. Elena stared at it, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He snapped the lid open. Resting on a bed of dark satin was a platinum chain holding a single, flawless black diamond. It was elegant, breathtakingly expensive, and unmistakably a collar. It was a physical manifestation of his claim. Gabriel took the jewelry from the box. He reached out, his warm fingers wrapping around her delicate wrist, the exact same wrist he had pinned to the bar at the Onyx just 48 hours ago. Elena did not pull away. She held her breath as he fastened the cool metal clasp. "The hunt for Silas Graves will escalate today," Gabriel stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "Julian will know by now that Arthur failed. They will look for my vulnerabilities. They will look for you." He dropped her hand, but his gaze remained locked on the dark stone resting against her pale skin. "This," Gabriel continued, gesturing slightly to the bracelet, "ensures that every soldier in my organization knows exactly who you are. You are mine. No one touches you. No one questions you." The possessiveness in his tone was absolute. He was not asking for her heart. He was claiming her existence. Elena looked down at the black diamond. A part of her, the fierce, independent survivor who had run for a decade, screamed at her to rip the chain off and flee. It was a beautiful shackle, tethering her to a man bathed in blood. But beneath the panic, a deeper, far more traitorous emotion bloomed. For 10 long, exhausting years, she had been entirely alone. She had carried the crushing weight of her own survival every single day, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the cartel to find her. Now, standing before the most dangerous man in the city, she felt a terrifying sense of relief. The heavy weight of his protection was intoxicating. To belong to someone, even a monster, felt like finally coming home. Elena raised her eyes to meet his. She did not fight the claim. She let her silence be the answer he demanded, accepting the invisible collar that bound her irrevocably to the Dark King of Chicago. The brittle morning peace lasted exactly 3 hours. Vince shattered it, stepping into the penthouse with a tablet gripped tightly in his hand. His face was a grim mask of pure operational focus. "We found the ghost," Vince announced. "Silas Graves is operating out of the Orpheum Theater tonight. There is a sold-out symphony performance. Thousands of civilians. Multiple exits. It is a logistical nightmare for an extraction. Gabriel transformed instantly. The sophisticated billionaire vanished, replaced entirely by a tactical warlord. He strode toward the armory concealed behind a false wall in his private study. When he emerged, the tailored suit was gone, swapped for dark tactical gear that seemed to absorb the light in the room. "Lock down the penthouse," Gabriel commanded, sliding a heavy magazine into his sidearm. "I am taking Caleb and a full strike team. We move in 20 minutes. Elena stood by the expansive glass wall, the black diamond resting heavy against her pulse point. The thought of waiting in the silent, gilded cage while Gabriel walked into a labyrinth designed by a master assassin was utterly intolerable. She crossed the room, stepping directly into his path. "I am coming with you," Elena stated. Gabriel stopped abruptly, his eyes darkening into twin storms. "Absolutely not. You are a civilian. The theater will be an active war zone." "I am your translator," Elena countered, her voice remarkably steady. She lifted her chin, refusing to yield a single inch. "You said it yourself last night. I see the architecture of the lie. You are walking into a crowded building where every shadow could be a fatal threat. Your men look for weapons. I look for the anomaly. Do not leave your best eyes locked in a glass tower." Vince let out a harsh breath of disbelief, ready to object, but Gabriel raised a single, gloved hand to silence his lieutenant. Gabriel stared down at Elena. He saw the fierce, unyielding resolve burning in her expression. She wore his collar, but she adamantly refused to be his pet. "You do not step foot inside the theater," Gabriel finally conceded, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You stay in the mobile command vehicle. You monitor the visual feeds. If you see a threat, you speak. If I tell you to go dark, you obey instantly. Is that understood?" "Understood," she agreed. By nightfall, Elena found herself seated inside a heavily armored surveillance van parked discreetly in a dark alley 2 blocks away from the Orpheum Theater. The interior was cramped, smelling of ozone and hot electronics. A glowing bank of monitors illuminated the small space, displaying live body camera feeds from Gabriel, Vince, Caleb, and 3 other syndicate soldiers. She pressed the communication headset over her ears. The channel crackled to life, filling her head with the synchronized, steady breathing of a strike team preparing for extreme violence. "Alpha Team, we are breaching the west loading dock." Gabriel's voice resonated through the headset, cold and meticulously professional. "Keep your spacing tight." On the central monitor, Elena watched Gabriel's perspective as he moved swiftly through the dimly lit service corridors of the historic theater. The distant, muffled swell of orchestral music vibrated through the audio feed, providing a surreal, dramatic soundtrack to the deadly infiltration. Elena leaned closer to the screens. Her mind fell into the deep, analytical trance she used to decipher complex linguistics. She did not merely watch the men, she watched the negative space around them. She scanned the architectural geometry, the shifting shadows, the forgotten corners of the old building. The team advanced toward the grand tier boxes, moving with lethal silence. Gabriel's camera swept across a narrow hallway lined with heavy velvet curtains and antique plaster statues. Something snagged in her peripheral vision. It was not on Gabriel's screen, but on Caleb's feed to the far right. Caleb was covering the rear flank. As his camera panned past a supposedly locked maintenance door, Elena noticed the subtle misalignment of the heavy brass hinges. More importantly, she saw the dust. The floorboards in the ancient corridor were coated in a fine layer of gray grime, but directly beneath that specific door, the dust was swept away in a perfect, sharp arc. Someone had opened that door recently. Someone was waiting behind it. "Gabriel, halt," Elena said into the microphone. Her voice was crisp, entirely devoid of panic. On the monitors, the entire strike team froze instantly. "Report," Gabriel commanded softly. Rear flank, Caleb's position, Elena directed, her eyes tracking the microscopic details on the glowing screen. The maintenance door on your immediate left. The dust pattern on the floorboard indicates the door was opened inward within the last hour. The hinges are slightly stressed. You have a blind spot ambush waiting directly behind that wood. A heartbeat of absolute silence passed over the comms. Then, Gabriel's feed shifted. He signaled Caleb with a sharp, decisive hand gesture. Caleb pivoted, raising his weapon toward the heavy wooden door. Instead of walking past it, the massive bodyguard delivered a devastating, brutal kick to the lock. The door splintered inward violently. The camera feed captured a chaotic blur of sudden motion. A man dressed entirely in black had been waiting in the dark recess, a suppressed weapon already raised. Caleb fired twice. The dull, heavy thuds echoed through the headset. The ambush was neutralized before the hidden gunman could even pull his trigger. Target down, Caleb reported, his breathing barely elevated. Good eyes, Overwatch. Gabriel's voice murmured through the earpiece, a deeply intimate acknowledgement layered beneath the tactical static. We are pushing forward. Elena exhaled a shaky breath, her fingers gripping the hard edge of the console. She had just guided the wolf through the dark. They were a terrifying, synchronized machine now. She kept her eyes glued to the monitors, ready to translate the next hidden threat. The strike team moved with ruthless efficiency past the neutralized threat. On the central monitor, Elena watched Gabriel approach the ornate double doors of Private Box 7. The crescendo of the symphony bled through the audio feed, a frantic clash of violins that perfectly mirrored the hammering of her own heart. Gabriel did not hesitate. He breached the doors, his weapon sweeping the plush, red velvet interior. The box was completely empty. A single, half-empty crystal flute of champagne sat on the ledge overlooking the stage. A silk theater program lay carelessly discarded on a velvet chair. The target is not here, Gabriel growled into the comms, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Search the adjacent boxes. Now. Elena did not wait for the physical search. Her hands flew across the console, switching her primary monitor to the exterior drone feed, circling high above the theater. She scanned the sidewalks, watching the scattered civilians who had stepped out early for a cigarette or a waiting car. Her eyes darted from shadow to shadow, applying her rigorous analytical focus to the chaotic street-level geometry. Then she saw it. A figure was walking briskly away from the main entrance, heading east down a dimly lit side street. The man was thin, his head ducked low beneath a dark hat. He wore an oversized gray overcoat. As he passed beneath the sickly yellow glow of a street lamp, he raised his right hand to adjust his collar. Even through the grainy resolution of the drone camera, the sudden glint of silver on his pinky finger was unmistakable. Gabriel, Elena said, her voice cutting sharply through the tactical chatter. Exterior feed. He slipped out the front. He is heading east down the side alley directly adjacent to the main promenade. Gray overcoat. I have visual confirmation of the ring. Copy, Gabriel replied. The camera feed dissolved into a violent blur of motion as he sprinted out of the theater box, abandoning stealth for pure, unadulterated speed. All units converge on the east alley. We box him in. Elena watched the tactical map overlay as the blue dots representing the strike team rapidly collapsed around the target. Gabriel reached the entrance of the alley first. The brick walls were high, the passage ending in a solid chain-link fence. It was a dead end. The figure in the gray overcoat stood with his back to the entrance, trapped. Turn around, Gabriel commanded. His voice echoing through the audio feed was not a request, it was a death sentence. Slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. The figure raised his hands, the sleeves of the oversized coat swallowing his wrists, and turned around. The camera feed stabilized, locking onto the target's face. Elena gasped aloud in the cramped surveillance van. It was not Silas Graves. It was a teenager. The boy was incredibly young, his face pale and contorted in absolute terror. He was trembling so violently that the cheap plastic replica ring on his finger rattled against a nearby dumpster. "Please," the boy stammered, tears spilling over his cheeks. "Do not shoot." A man approached me 2 blocks away. He gave me $300 in cash. He told me to put on this coat and walk down this exact alley. He said it was a prank for a film student. I swear to God, I do not know anything else. A heavy, suffocating silence descended over the communication channel. The brilliant, deadly trap had snapped shut, but it had caught nothing but a terrified child. Silas Graves had not just evaded them. He had orchestrated a theatrical diversion, utilizing Gabriel's own aggressive tactics against him. He had lured the wolf out of his den simply to humiliate him on his own streets. "Lower your weapons," Gabriel ordered his men. His voice was no longer angry. It was terrifyingly hollow. "Let the boy go." The operation was a catastrophic failure. The ride back to the penthouse in the armored vehicle was entirely devoid of conversation. The adrenaline that had fueled their coordination had curdled into a toxic, heavy ash. Elena sat in the dark cabin, the monitors powered down, acutely aware of the dangerous energy radiating from the man beside her. Gabriel stared straight ahead, his jaw locked in a rigid line. When the private elevator doors finally opened into the penthouse, Gabriel did not shed his tactical gear immediately. He walked straight to the bar and poured a generous measure of dark whiskey, swallowing it in one smooth, burning motion. Vince and Caleb stood near the entrance, awaiting their orders, their postures stiff with the shame of the defeat. "He knew our exact breach point," Gabriel said to the glass in his hand. He did not raise his voice, but the quiet menace in the room was suffocating. He knew the precise timing of our arrival. He left that champagne glass to mock us. Arthur gave Julian the security rotations, Vince offered cautiously. Perhaps Julian shared them with Silas. Gabriel turned slowly, his winter gray eyes locking onto his lieutenant. Arthur gave them shipping schedules and guard shifts for the docks. The Orpheum Theater operation was planned less than 4 hours ago. Only the people in this specific room knew the tactical layout. The implication dropped like a live grenade onto the polished concrete floor. Gabriel was no longer looking at his trusted soldiers. He was looking at potential traitors. The paranoia that kept him alive was now a poison infecting his inner circle. His gaze drifted from Vince to Caleb and finally rested heavily on Elena. "The rot goes much deeper than an aging accountant," Gabriel stated softly, his eyes searching her face for any flicker of deceit. "Silas Graves has a source directly connected to my command. And until I find out who it is, no one is above suspicion." Elena felt the cold metal of the black diamond bracelet resting against her pulse point. Just hours ago, it had felt like a symbol of protection, a dark vow shared in the shadows of a library. Now, under the crushing weight of Gabriel's paranoia, it felt exactly like a chain. The brief, intense connection they had forged was rapidly dissolving, swallowed once again by the ruthless, calculating monster Chicago demanded him to be. The penthouse felt like a tomb constructed of glass and concrete. For 2 agonizing hours, Gabriel remained locked inside his private study. Vince and Caleb stood like silent gargoyles in the living area, their eyes occasionally darting toward Elena with thinly veiled suspicion. The toxic cloud of paranoia Gabriel had unleashed threatened to choke the life out of the fragile alliance they had built. Elena sat on the leather sofa, her fingers nervously tracing the cold edges of her secure laptop. She refused to retreat to the guest room. She refused to let the wolf push her back into the shadows. If Gabriel demanded absolute loyalty, she would not prove it with desperate pleas. She would prove it with her mind. She opened the laptop and accessed the encrypted syndicate network Ms. Hayes had set up for her. She navigated to the data packets Vince had compiled prior to the raid on the Orpheum Theater. She pulled up the VIP guest list for the evening performance. Her eyes scanned the digital columns, shifting into the cold, analytical space where fear could not reach her. She looked past the obvious targets. Silas Graves had chosen a crowded public venue for a specific reason. The decoy had been a brilliant tactical misdirection, but Silas was fundamentally a businessman. He did not waste time playing games unless the game served a higher purpose. He was not there just to humiliate Gabriel. He was there for a meeting. Elena analyzed the names assigned to the private viewing boxes. Box 7 had been the decoy. She scrutinized the occupants of boxes 1 through 6. They were wealthy socialites, old Chicago money, and corporate executives. None of them fit the profile of someone who would conduct business with a high-level underworld facilitator. Then she saw the name registered to Box 4. Alderman Richard Sterling. Elena stared at the screen, her breath hitching. Alderman Sterling was the most vocal, aggressive anti-corruption politician in the city. He had built his entire career on promising to dismantle the Chicago syndicate, specifically targeting Gabriel Thorne. Sterling appearing at an elite social event was not unusual, but his presence in a private, secluded box on the exact night the city's most dangerous ghost decided to surface was an anomaly too massive to ignore. She stood up, grabbing the laptop. Vince immediately stepped into her path, his massive frame blocking the hallway to the study. The boss gave strict orders, Vince warned, his voice low and hostile. "Do not disturb him." "Move, Vince," Elena commanded. Her voice held zero hesitation. She channeled the absolute authority she had witnessed Gabriel use, letting the coldness seep into her tone. "I have the answer he is tearing this penthouse apart looking for." Vince hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Before he could argue further, the heavy oak door of the study clicked open. Gabriel stood in the doorway. He had discarded his tactical vest, his black shirt clinging to his rigid shoulders. His eyes were bloodshot, radiating a dark, exhausting fury. "Let her pass," Gabriel ordered. Elena walked past the bodyguard and stepped into the study. The room smelled of dark whiskey and ozone. She did not wait for Gabriel to speak. She walked directly to his mahogany desk and turned the laptop screen toward him. "You are looking at the tactical failure," Elena began, her voice steady and relentless. "You are looking for a leak in your inner circle. You need to pull back and look at the strategy. Why did Silas Graves choose the Orpheum Theater?" Gabriel looked down at the screen, his jaw muscles clenching. "To set a trap. To hold a meeting," Elena corrected him immediately. She pointed a trembling finger at the glowing digital text. "Look at the registry for Box 4. Alderman Richard Sterling." Gabriel froze. His eyes locked onto the politician's name. The crushing, chaotic paranoia in his expression vanished, replaced instantly by a terrifying, absolute clarity. "Sterling," Gabriel whispered, the name carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Silas Graves is a broker," Elena continued, stepping closer to the desk. "He does not just hire assassins. He negotiates alliances. Think about the linguistics of the situation, Gabriel. Julian does not just want you dead. If you die in a street war, the syndicate fractures. Julian needs legitimacy to hold the throne. He needs the authorities to look the other way." Gabriel slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. The cold suspicion was completely gone. In its place was a burning, awestruck realization. "An alliance," Gabriel breathed out, his tactical mind rapidly assembling the terrifying bid picture. "Julian pays Silas Graves to orchestrate a coup. Silas brokers a deal with Alderman Sterling. Sterling uses his political power to ensure the police ignore Julian's ascension. In exchange, Julian hands Sterling the heads of our rival families on a silver platter. Sterling becomes the hero who cleaned up Chicago, and Julian takes my empire without a single arrest." It was a masterstroke of political and criminal engineering. The enemy was not just lurking in the shadows of the underworld. The enemy was standing squarely in the bright, legitimate lights of the city government. They used the symphony crowd as cover to finalize the terms, Elena concluded softly. "The leak in your organization only provided the timing. The true threat is the signature they were putting on that invisible contract." Gabriel rounded the desk. He closed the space between them until the tips of their shoes touched. The heavy, toxic air of the room dissolved, replaced by the electric, undeniable connection that bound them together. He reached out, his large hands gripping her shoulders. His touch was firm, grounding, and fiercely possessive. "You found the thread," Gabriel said, his voice a low rumble vibrating in his chest. "I was blinded by the insult, and you saw the entire board. What do we do now?" Elena asked, her heart hammering against her ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer proximity of the wolf. Gabriel looked down at her, a dark, lethal smile slowly curving his lips. It was a smile that promised absolute ruin for his enemies. Alderman Sterling is hosting the annual Museum of Antiquities fundraising gala in exactly 2 days, Gabriel stated softly. It is a highly secure, heavily guarded event. Silas Graves will be there to collect his final payment from Julian and secure Sterling's formal protection. He released her shoulders, his hands sliding down her arms to capture her wrists. His thumb brushed gently against the black diamond resting on her pulse. "We are going to walk straight into the light," Gabriel promised. "We are going to attend a gala." The next 48 hours blurred into a frantic, meticulously orchestrated sequence of events. The penthouse transformed from a silent gilded cage into a highly volatile tactical war room. Digital blueprints of the Museum of Antiquities covered every inch of the mahogany desk in the study. Vince and Caleb spent hours coordinating the exterior perimeter, mapping out the security blind spots, police patrol routes, and emergency extraction paths. The primary obstacle was the inner sanctum of the gala. The VIP salon, where Alderman Sterling would undoubtedly hold his private summit with Silas Graves, was an impenetrable fortress. Metal detectors, independent private security firms, and a strictly vetted guest list meant Gabriel could not bring his trusted soldiers inside. Caleb and Vince would have to remain on the street level. Gabriel would have to walk into the lion's den entirely unarmed, stripped of the physical force that usually protected him. He needed a ghost. He needed someone who fundamentally belonged in a room of international power brokers, but would be completely overlooked by the men plotting his murder. "I am hosting a highly lucrative, incredibly paranoid foreign investor tonight," Gabriel explained to Elena, tracing the museum blueprints with a steady finger. "He speaks no English, and he only trusts negotiations conducted in his native tongue. You are my personal translator. That specific role grants you immediate, unquestioned proximity to every single conversation I have in that room. You will be my eyes and my ears." On the evening of the fundraising gala, Ms. Hayes arrived with a series of heavy garment bats. The preparation was not merely physical. It was the forging of psychological armor. Elena stood before the massive mirror in the guest suite, staring at the stranger looking back at her. The gown Ms. Hayes had selected was a masterpiece of dark emerald silk. It was cut dangerously low in the back, clinging to her frame like a second skin, and pulled like liquid glass around her heels. It was not a dress designed for a woman trying to hide in the shadows of a dive bar. It was a dress designed to command the absolute attention of an entire room. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant, intricate style that exposed the long line of her neck. The black diamond rested perfectly against her collarbone, a stark, glittering reminder of her permanent allegiance to the Syndicate King. She looked at her own reflection and did not recognize the terrified bartender from the onyx. The woman in the mirror possessed the intellect to dismantle an empire and the cold resolve to watch it burn. The heavy oak door clicked open. Gabriel stepped into the suite. He wore a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders flawlessly. The dangerous, feral wolf was perfectly concealed beneath the polished, wealthy veneer of Chicago high society. He stopped dead in his tracks the second his eyes landed on her. The air in the room instantly evaporated. The intense, predatory hunger she had witnessed in the library flared in his winter gray eyes, burning completely unchecked for a long, agonizing moment. Gabriel walked slowly toward her, his gaze sweeping over the dark emerald silk. The physical distance between them vanished. "You are breathtaking," Gabriel murmured. His voice was a rough vibration that sent a violent, electric shiver straight down her spine. He reached out, his knuckles brushing lightly against the bare skin of her shoulder. "They will look at you, and they will only see beauty. They will not look for the razor blade hidden underneath. That will be their fatal mistake." He dropped his hand, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The raw desire was locked away, replaced by the calculating focus of a warlord preparing for a siege. "I am unarmed tonight, Elena," Gabriel continued, his tone deadly serious. "I am placing my life entirely in your hands. If Silas Graves recognizes you from the club, or if Julian has managed to compromise the private security detail inside the salon, we will have less than 30 seconds to react before they close the trap." Elena met his intense gaze without a single trace of hesitation. The paralyzing fear that had governed her life for 10 years was completely gone. In its place was a cold, crystalline focus. She was no longer running. "They will not recognize a ghost wearing emeralds," Elena promised, her voice steady and relentless. "I know the exact cadence of their lies. I will find the trap before they even realize we are standing in it." They descended to the underground garage in total silence. The heavily armored SUV waited in the sterile light, its massive engine purring softly. The drive through the glittering Chicago streets felt surreal. The city was completely oblivious to the quiet war about to erupt within its cultural heart. Elena sat beside Gabriel in the dark, luxurious cabin. The physical distance between them was minimal, the electric tension acting as a constant, heavy presence in the confined space. Gabriel reached across the leather seat and took her hand. His long fingers intertwined with hers, his thumb resting securely over her racing pulse point. It was not a gesture of romantic comfort. It was a shared vow of absolute destruction. They were no longer a captive civilian and a ruthless captor. They were partners, predators sitting in the dark, moving quietly toward the hunting grounds. The Museum of Antiquities was a fortress of marble and glass, illuminated by thousands of glittering lights that reflected off the pristine jewelry of Chicago high society. Private security guards lined every exit, their eyes scanning the affluent crowd for any sign of a threat. Gabriel and Elena moved seamlessly through the grand hall. Gabriel played his part to absolute perfection, the wealthy, untouchable patron of the arts, while Elena remained a respectful half-step behind him, the quiet, indispensable translator. They navigated toward the exclusive VIP salon located on the second floor. The air here was thicker, heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet, high-stakes negotiations. Gabriel engaged a European shipping magnate in a complex conversation, utilizing Elena to translate the rapid Italian. The role gave her the perfect, unremarkable excuse to sweep her gaze across the entire room while she spoke. Her analytical mind filtered through the noise, the clinking glasses, and the forced laughter. She looked for the anomaly. She found it in a secluded alcove near the ancient Egyptian exhibits. Alderman Richard Sterling stood with a glass of sparkling water, his posture rigid. Standing opposite him, partially obscured by a massive stone pillar, was a man in a tailored tuxedo. He wore no oversized gray overcoat tonight, but as he reached for a silver cigarette case, the museum lights caught the distinct shape of a hawk carved into the onyx ring on his right pinky finger. Silas Graves. There in the northwest alcove, Elena murmured in flawless Italian, seamlessly weaving the warning into her translation regarding shipping logistics. Silas is handing Sterling a small leather ledger. They're confirming the offshore account transfers. Gabriel nodded slightly, offering a polite smile to the shipping magnate before excusing himself. He offered his arm to Elena. Together, they walked directly into the lion's den. They did not draw weapons. They did not raise their voices. Gabriel approached the alcove with the terrifying, unhurried grace of an apex predator. Alderman Sterling saw him first. The color completely drained from the politician's face. Silas Graves turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the wolf standing entirely unarmed in the heart of a public gala. Alderman Sterling, Gabriel greeted, his voice smooth and carrying perfectly over the classical music. "I was hoping to discuss the upcoming city zoning initiatives with you." Sterling forced a panicked smile, his eyes darting toward the security guards stationed 20 feet away. "Gabriel, this is a private conversation. Perhaps we can schedule a meeting at my office next week." "There is no need," Gabriel replied, stepping into the alcove and effectively trapping both men against the stone exhibits. He looked directly at Silas Graves. "Because the contract you are currently finalizing is null and void." Silas remained perfectly still, a ghost realizing he had just been illuminated. Elena stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with the king of the Chicago syndicate. She looked directly into the eyes of the corrupt politician. "The ledger in your left pocket contains the routing numbers for 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands," Elena stated softly, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of a judge delivering a final verdict. "The funds were transferred by Julian Rossi to purchase your political protection. Furthermore, we possess the written, signed confession of Arthur, the accountant who facilitated the initial leak." Sterling began to tremble. The political shield he had spent his entire life building was cracking under the weight of her words. "You have a choice, Richard," Gabriel murmured, leaning in close. "You can call your security. We will be escorted out. And tomorrow morning, every major news outlet in this city, along with the federal authorities, will receive the digital footprint of your transactions with a known syndicate facilitator. Your career, your legacy, and your freedom will evaporate before noon." Gabriel let the absolute terror settle into the politician's bones before offering the alternative. "Or," Gabriel continued smoothly, "you can hand me that ledger. You will publicly denounce Julian Rossi's illegal operations during your press conference tomorrow. You will sever all ties with Silas Graves immediately. Do this, and you remain a hero to the public. You keep your office, but you will forever belong to me." Sterling looked at Silas, desperate for a way out. But Silas Graves was a businessman who dealt strictly in survival. The ghost recognized that the game was entirely lost. The brilliant trap had been dismantled without a single shot being fired. Silas took a slow step backward, melting into the shadows of the museum, abandoning the politician to his fate. Defeated, utterly broken, Sterling reached into his tuxedo pocket. His hand shook violently as he surrendered the small leather ledger to Gabriel. "A wise decision, Alderman," Gabriel said, pocketing the ledger. He offered a cold, terrifying smile. "Enjoy the rest of the gala." They walked away, leaving the ruined politician standing alone in the alcove. The war was over. Julian had lost his political protection and his assassin, leaving him entirely exposed to Vince and Caleb waiting on the streets outside. Gabriel had secured his empire not with bullets, but with the brilliant, analytical mind of the woman walking beside him. Later that night, the penthouse was completely silent. The adrenaline of the evening had slowly faded, leaving behind a profound, heavy peace. Elena stood by the massive glass wall, looking out over the glittering expanse of Chicago. The city belonged to the wolf, and the wolf was standing right behind her. Gabriel wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, inhaling the sweet scent of her skin. "You are extraordinary tonight," Gabriel whispered, his voice a low, rough vibration. Elena raised her hand, her fingers gently touching the platinum chain and the black diamond resting against her collarbone. She had spent 10 grueling years running from the darkness, trying desperately to remain invisible. But the shadows were no longer a place of fear. They were her domain. She was the eyes that saw the lies, the mind that deciphered the silence, and the only woman who could stand beside the most dangerous man in the city. She turned in his arms, looking up into his winter gray eyes, fully embracing the beautiful, terrifying gray of her new life. We have reached the conclusion of this intense and emotional journey. This story teaches us a profound lesson about the true nature of power and survival. True strength does not always come from physical force or loud intimidation. Often, the greatest power lies in quiet observation, intellectual sharpness, and the courage to understand the unspoken words around us. Elena taught us that running from our past and hiding in the shadows will never truly keep us safe. Sometimes, we must step out of our comfort zone, face our deepest fears, and embrace our unique talents to protect ourselves and the people we care about. If this story captivated you and touched your heart, please hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends so you can listen to many more attractive videos every single day. How did this story make you feel? How do you relate the themes of overcoming your past and finding your inner strength to your own real life? We deeply wish for you to share your comments below so we can listen to the feelings from deep within your hearts. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.